Adam, both of us had the experience in the past couple months of visiting a church for the first time, hearing the mix, and then kind of quickly having to address any issues that we heard. Mainly we're talking about just a normal front of house mix within the worship center at a church. For me, this was when I visited Grace Church and started helping them out for the first time in Florida. And then for you, it was a church here in Colorado. So I just want to kind of talk through some of the processes of like, okay, what are just the common things that we see and kind of the problems, like how do we diagnose these mix issues and how do we go about fixing them? And these are like fixing them without doing any like massive overhauls to the PA or anything. It's like just quickly, like if I had an hour to fix something, how would I do it? I think the first thing that I'll just go first because it's fresh on my mind. So the first thing the first thing I noticed, so at Grace Church, they have a M32 as their main mixing console they're using the Behringer stage boxes. And then they also have Waves Super Rack right next to the console, which can process all of those channels individually. So the first thing that I noticed, and I heard it too, when I got into the room, I'm like, okay, they have a nice new PA. It's a newer building, less than a year old, new PA, really great system. But it did sound like things were just kind of like over processed, over compressed, over EQ'd, like to the point where like I just feel like I wasn't hearing as much data and information as I should have been hearing from vocalists, instruments, and stuff. So when I got to take a look at the mixing console and Wave Super Rack, and if you guys don't know Wave Super Rack, it is kind of a separate server, almost kind of like a DAW or something, but really you're just sending individual audio channels from your mixing console, into Wave Super Racks. Really, actually, we were going straight from the preamps on the stage box into Super Rack, getting processed, and then back into the mixing console into our channels. So in Wave Super Rack, you can put on EQs, compressions, auto-tune, all that fun stuff, right? So the first thing that I noticed is that they were applying multiple EQs in like different locations. So you have like an EQ on the M32, and then you had an EQ on the same channel in Waves. And to me, that's just very confusing. And when you're trying to mix and you're kind of working with two different EQs. So there's multiple EQs going on, multiple compressors in some cases. And then sometimes just looking in Wave Super Rack, there's just kind of a little too much going on. So my first thing I think I do when I assess a mix or what common problem I see is you got to keep it simple. It's overcomplicated, the amount of processing that's put on different channels. And sometimes what happens is it's almost like, you have like a wound or an injury that you got to fix and you put on a Band-Aid, but that doesn't like fix it. So you try putting on another Band-Aid and another Band-Aid, another Band-Aid, and then soon it's just like, you don't even know what you're trying to fix in the first place anymore. So this complexity, the way I tried to combat that was really just, okay, let's just disable it all. Like let's literally just like start from scratch and start with the basics. So I was kind of in a time crunch because I was doing this during their hour and a half long rehearsal or whatever. And we just started with vocals because I'm like, vocals are the most important thing. You want everybody to hear it sound good. And now those were what I feel like had the most opportunity to take to the next level because I felt like you just weren't hearing as how good these singers actually were because things were being over processed. So I would, first of all, kind of assess like, okay, where's the gain at on these channels and make sure it's metering in a healthy way on the preamp and stuff. And that stuff was good. It was all good to go. It looked good. It was great. But then the other thing you gotta be careful with if you're trying to clean up a mix or a board and you're not starting new with a brand new scene is you can't just go like immediately disabling everything because then your gain could really get messed up and things could go berserk, like overloading channels, causing feedback, or because maybe you had like a compressor that was just like slamming down that channel like really, really hard. So that it was reducing the volume and then you disable it and then it's going to blast or something like that. So I had to carefully like disable things, see kind of manage the gain structure through it. And then, but then like, once I got the Midas board clear and then the sound grid or Super Rat cleared, I was able to like rebuild. And what we decided to do is we really like working with the Waves plugins, the M32 built-in processing. It's okay. Like we probably could be fine using EQ and compression there, but to clean it up and simplify it, we're like, let's only use the M32 pretty much for our channel faders, the channel output faders, and mix buses, and then sending that to the master mix. Like that's literally all it is. We're not using like any, or if we are, it's very little of the actual EQ compressors and things like that. So we moved majority of processing into Waves, and now we could start new. So, okay, make sure, again, double check, make sure gain structure looks and sounds the way it should be when it's going from Waves into the M32. Another thing to consider too, because this is a common thing we've probably seen a lot, is where at a church their amplifiers to their PA speakers are just like cranked up way more than they should be. So then, when you have gain staged properly at the board and your faders kind of near unity, it's just too loud. It's like causing feedback and it's just insane. It's probably because speakers are, the amplification of your speakers and your PA is just like over cranked. So fortunately that wasn't the case. Like that, again, they had this, the system was installed and the people who installed it like set them at a good level. So it's like, when I have the gain proper on a channel and I play a track through it, it's going to be at 95 decibels max or something like that when the master's at unity, probably closer to 100. We actually, they run it pretty hot there. So that was like the process, was just clearing it off the Midas board and then just rebuilding everything in Waves. So when it comes to processing on an individual channel, the plugin chains, I'll probably make a video about this, so I won't have to get too much detail it now. I'm going to be back in Florida soon, and I can kind of actually show people how we're mixing, but the basics of, I think we use Waves tune plugin first, and then we do EQ, and then compression, sometimes serial compression with like an LA, and then the other LA, like the bluey or blacky LA. I don't know, it kind of helps. Instead of one compressor doing all the work, you can spread it out on two. Then we also have like a dynamic EQ. I can't even remember off the top of my head what exact order. But we just get all the plugins we actually need, and then a de-esser. That's my favorite on vocals, right? So we just get all those. We got it processed for our vocals, and then we send it to the M32. It's good. Same thing with every vocal channel, every instrument channel. Just apply the processing, EQ, compression, any special plugins in Waves, send it to the M32. And then the other thing I was able to do to really significantly help the mix was to utilize some more bus processing. So fortunately, they have a separate mixing console that it's a X32 rack they're using for in-ears. So they're just getting from stage box, the main stage box, the signals get sent to both the Midas board or Waves, and then also to their X32 for in-ears. So they get independent mixing there, which really frees up a lot of mix buses on the M32 to use for our master mix. So we use the mixing blueprint you talked about in our course, where let's bust together our drum set, let's bust together our instruments, let's bust together vocals, apply some light compression there. Even we could do some parallel compression on the drums. And I pretty much implemented that with the M32, and it's amazing how much more control we have over the mix. Everything sounds really balanced, sounds really full, and we got some great results. So I'm excited to see where the mix is at. I've been gone there for like a month and a half, so it's always interesting to see how things evolve over time. But we'll see when we get back. But no, I mean, it's fun explaining these concepts to the guys there. Shout out to Asa if he's listening to this, and the rest of the crew. But really just like less is more, I think, with mixing. Sometimes, or what's cool is when you have plugins like the F6 dynamic EQ plugin that lets you only apply EQ when you actually need it. Like, so you're not, removing all that information from someone's voice or instrument. But it's all retained there. It's all gonna be there. But when they get loud, you can start cutting out those harsh frequencies that you don't like. That was it, man. So really, like, they had, again, great infrastructure, great board, all the mixing capability they need. It's really just simplify. Less is more. That was my experience with Grace's mix.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a similar like mostly gain structure issue at Renato's church. And Renato has been through our program. The person that he's been training to be their main mix engineer was there, and he was utilizing the trainings within worship ministry school. He had learned about the EQs, and a lot of the EQs that he had in place were good. But when I came in a little bit before rehearsal. So I just wanted to see the state of their PA system. So I played some music through and I looked at the levels coming in, and then I saw where the amps were set, and they had their main fader at negative 20 or 30 or 40. It was pretty low. And then all of their channel faders were pretty low as well. So what I was able to do is turn the amps down to the main PA, which was hung well by a professional install company, but just the signal getting to the amplifiers was really quiet, so the amps were cranked. So being able to just pull everything back except for just my phone that had some music I was familiar with, and then I set the gain structure properly on the channel. There's no EQ and no processing on this channel. It's just my phone coming in. And then I was able to set that gain structure properly, set the gain structure on the amps properly. So we were in a starting place where it was like, okay, when we're done mixing, our main fader will be at 0. Our channel faders will be, closer to 0. And it'll be the volume that it needs to be. So that was one of the main problems. Another thing, every single channel, the compressor gain structure was messed up. So even when I got the input gain structure set properly, the compressor gain structure was just like totally whacked. So being able to do a similar thing where I just disable and then, get the gain structure properly while the fader's coming down, and then pulling that up and then applying processing. That's kind of the method that you want to go. Anytime you're redoing a channel, anytime you're trying to fix something, is, pull down the fader, remove the processing, see that the gain structure coming in is what it needs to be, and then push the fader up. And then you can start to add a compressor, a high pass filter, the EQ, all that processing that you want to do, so that you're not trying to make up for a mistake that you made earlier with something like gain structure. So that was a big part of it. And again, we teach this in the Mixing for Worship course. We talk a lot about source. So getting good sources and good source tone. Some of their DI boxes were just set improperly, where they maybe had a couple bad cables here and there. So just making sure that the instrument volume was up all the way, like on the keyboards or on the guitars, and then up all the way, or 3/4 or somewhere between there, and then getting it into a good DI box that is set properly so that the signal that we get coming in is what it needs to be. So that's even more important than getting the gain structure right, is making sure that the instrument is set up properly and that it's coming into the system properly. So those were the main things there. Coming in, fixing the PA. I did a little tuning as well on it, but getting the amp set for the PA system, getting the gain structure coming in on every channel properly, getting the gain structure on the compressors properly. And then from there, they were like, wow, our in-ears sound better. The house mix sounds better. Everything is just cleaner. The noise floor comes down when you turn the amps down. Your noise floor is lower there. You're not going to get static or hum when the PA is on, but the channels are down. But their EQs were pretty good. Like, he had a good handle on how to balance between different vocalists and different instruments, and he had a good idea about EQ. Um, the other thing they were concerned with was their online mix, but as soon as I fixed all those other issues, their online mix improved too.
Yeah. Yep. Man, it's all the simple stuff. It's like
Yeah.
it's like really not that like because again, when you're like getting good source tone and levels and gain, it's like everything else is almost just like cherry on top. It's not even it's you don't even really have to be that complex with EQ and compression. So in that, man, I don't understand like why these systems when they get installed, they're not. Maybe it is it happens too when people like switch out mixing consoles because that could be a variable that changes it. But getting that signal right from your mixing console to your speakers and not making sure it's not over cranked or too quiet, that's such a common thing. And it's I think remember we've come across that method which people set gain by putting their fader to unity and then turning up their gain, which doesn't, I mean, that's not what we agree with, but I think that's probably why
Yeah.
people do that is because they're like, I want my faders at unity, but so it doesn't like feedback like crazy. I have to, keep my gain way lower than it should be.
Yeah. And that's just an imbalanced system throughout. Like that's maybe like a quicker band-aid fix so that your board faders look pretty. I don't know exactly. I haven't run into too many professionals, very few, maybe no professionals that have said that this is the proper way to do it. Like
Yeah.
every
But
time we go on a trip, we talk to like someone like Jesse from Red Rocks or Luke Hendrickson from Bethel or like the guys from Belonging Co. Like any of those guys will say, set your gain and then move your fader up. That's just the way it's supposed to be.
yeah. Yeah, and just make sure the rest of your system is set up properly. It's like
Yep.
if that one tried true way doesn't work, then you gotta like something else is wrong, and it's worth fixing. And it might be as simple as just walking to wherever the rack is for your amps and just turn them down or whatever. Like it's not the beauty of all this. Everything that you and I just did, improving these mixes, like none of it required new gear or new
Right.
really anything. It was just the know-how, as simple as that. So yeah, I hope this is helpful to anybody listening. You're trying to diagnose like what the problem is with your mix. Maybe you're being too complex. Maybe your amps are off. Make sure maybe your gain staging isn't right. It's really gonna have a huge impact, and it's all because your live stream mix, your in-ear mixes, those are all downstream from getting these really important things right that we just talked about in this session here. But anything else, Adam? Any closing thoughts, tips for folks trying to diagnose their mix or the problems?
Yeah, I just agree with what you said about keeping it simple and mastering the basics is going to get you really far.